In this video, we're going to take a look at playgrounds in Xcode. With playgrounds, we can enter in some code and it'll show us the output without having to compile a project. So this video is also going to give you an early introduction to variables and constants in Swift. So if you don't completely understand all of the content or code that I demonstrate in playgrounds, don't worry, because the next section of tutorial is completely on variables and declaring variables and working with variables. So let's get started by launching Xcode. And this time, instead of creating a project, we're going to get started with a playground. So let's just give it a name, playing with playgrounds. You can name this whatever you want. We just want to make sure that we have iOS selected and click next. Then we can save it in our normal place. I've created an applications folder on my desktop that I save all of my Xcode projects in, so I'm just going to click create and save it there. And we'll see that when our playground is open the first time, it is going to have a variable already declared for us here. So we see var for declaring a variable. Str, which is short for string here, is the name of the variable, and we have it equal to hello playground. And then you see the output over here on the side. So first, let's just look at after you have initialized a variable, which is what we did here, set a variable named string equal to hello playground, you can change the variable because it's a variable. So we just say str equals goodbye. When we hit enter, it will show us that the variable str is now equal to goodbye. Next, let's try to look at one more example. So let's create a variable called name and set it equal to John Smith. So we'll see here in just a second that I have initialized a variable named name and set it equal to John Smith. And one more time we can change it. So now we'll say name equals Granny Smith. And if we hit enter, we'll see after a second that the variable name is now equal to Granny Smith. So remember that the variable type string, if you're familiar with programming languages, if not, you'll learn more about this soon, is for a line of characters. So each one of these is a character, and then all of this as a collection here is a string that is equal to Granny Smith. So let's create a variable called string address and implicitly tell Xcode that this is going to be a string. So we would do that by doing variable and then street address and string, and then set it equal to, let's pick Eisenhower Avenue. So now we have a variable named street address that we have told Xcode will be a string, so it's only going to take a string data type, and we've set it equal to Eisenhower Avenue. So it's possible to declare variables like this, but as you saw up here, based on what you enter, Xcode is going to try to guess what the data type of your variable will be. So let's look at this. Since we knew by initializing what it would be here, if we wanted to create a variable that was going to be an unknown string, we would have to, at that point, tell Xcode that it is a string, since we're not initializing it with any kind of value. Now let's look at working with integers or numbers. So let's create a variable called int, integer, which is short for number, and set it equal to 4. And then let's work with that integer. So we have the variable now, named integer, we've set it equal to 4, and I want to perform some kind of calculation with that number. So I'm going to say 3 times int. There we go. So it's performed the calculation of storing the value, or multiplying 3 times the value of what was stored in int up here, which was 4. So now let's try to work a little more with variables. Let's create a variable that just is known as a and set it equal to 5. And then we will create another variable called b and make that equal to a times 3. There we go, we got 15. So you can see it's possible to create variables and then create another variable that is equal to something that we already have stored in a variable times a number. So we can perform calculations through variables. So let's say that we want to work with a decimal and we want to create a variable called c that we want to tell it is going to be a double and make that equal to 5 divided by 2. Since we wouldn't have a whole number for that, we definitely have a decimal. So we get 2.5 there. If we had done variable c equals 5 divided by 2, not 3, variable, let's work with something else. Variable divide equals 5 divided by 2 without telling it to be a double. You'll see that we get 2. So if we don't tell it it's going to be a double, it's going to drop off everything from the decimal point back. It's only going to give us back a decimal point when we tell it to give a double. Otherwise, it's going to give us an int, which will just be a whole number. So here we still have our int set to 4 up here. So let's work with that and say c times double int. Since we want to multiply a double time an integer, we want to get a double answer if that's necessary. So here we are telling it the variable c that we have already initialized as 5 divided by 2, so it equals 2.5, and we want to multiply that times an integer that we set before, which was equal to 4. So you see that we get 10, which is in fact correct. Now let's try to work with a string. So we want variable a as a double is equal to 3.5. We're going to say variable b. Oh, we're going to use that. Let's do it lowercase. Variable b as an int is equal to 4, and variable c is equal to a times a double b. Then we'll hit enter. We're going to use some kind of error here. Let's see what it is. That's interesting. Let's just try variable a times b. one more time, variable a times b. We want the lowercase one. Okay, we'll go with our uppercase value. Variable a times b, so we get 20. So now we want a variable string and set that equal to the value of a times b is equal to c. So now when we hit enter, we'll see the value of 5 times 4 is 20. So that's just a basic look at working with playgrounds, a quick introduction to variables, which we will go over more thoroughly in the next section of tutorials. So we will see you back here soon.